Hey guys, welcome back in. Anthony here with Advanced Vector, and today I'm going to bring you a kind of an introduction to what I've got going on with the project I've been working on. So I've been using Proxmox for 5 years now for the cloud, I guess you could say, that I have set up at my house. I love it. It's a super great hypervisor. What I'm bringing, or what I'm specifically want to talk about today, is Ceph. So I have a separate FreeNAS server that I run. It's got 12 1 terabyte drives in it, and that has been, what I store not only my virtual machine disk images on, but also my backups and everything like that. So I kind of want to get away from that single source of failure. So I've been looking at different options, and I've got these four Dell T410 tower servers. They're a little bit older, but they still pack quite a bit of punch. I've got they're not all configured exactly the same. The first two are completely finished. I still got to get the RAM kit for the third one, but I buy all this stuff out of pocket, so it comes along as it can. But basically, we'll take a look at the summary here, and I might have to blur some of this out if I'm AWOXing myself or something. I don't think anything on here would be sensitive, but I have got these dual hex core E5649 Xeons in it. They're not the top of the line hex cores, but they're still pretty good. 2.53 gigahertz. I'm pretty satisfied with that. Combined with the price, I can't remember what I paid for them. I bought them a few months back, but I want to say that I could get them for like 10 or 15 bucks for a pair of them. So really cheap for the kind of performance you're able to get out of them, especially for just a small home lab like what I've got going on. So my objective here today is to get this swapped over. Like I said, I want to change the storage backend for my virtual disk images so that if something happens, I don't lose both of them at the same time. So changing the storage backend. So I've done a lot of research and finding, okay, what could I do? There's Gluster FS, Ceph, which is what I'm going to be doing here. And a few other options as well. I could just do local and not have the capability of doing the live migration, but I really didn't want to lose any functionality that I have over NFS, but I wanted to kind of take away that single point of failure, so to speak. So we're going to be looking at Ceph today. So I have actually already got most of it up and running. I tested it and all of that stuff before. But the big thing that I was waiting for before I actually put this in production is, if you look at my last video, you'll probably see, but I have brought in some adapters and some NVMe drives. And so really quick, just to kind of remind you guys, we'll jump back over here. And I just did the video for these right before this. But I've got these NVMe drives that I want to use as the journals or the DB for the OSDs and Ceph. Again, I'm not an expert. This is my first foray into Ceph, but from what I understand, this can definitely help improve my performance. And then since I have older servers that do not have NVMe drives, I thought, well, I'm going to take a shot. I'm going to take a stab in the dark, and I'm going to see if it'll work in these older machines. From what I understand, it should. I don't think you can boot from these NVMe drives on older hardware, but from what I understand, the Linux kernel should still see them as storage once everything boots up. And that's really all I need for this, since I'm just using them as that wall and DB device for my OSDs. So that's what's going to be going in. I haven't installed them yet, but I kind of wanted to give the overview. I'm going to get them installed, and then we'll come back in and set everything up and whatnot. But the rest of my setup here is so each one of these has four. Let's look at the disks here. I've got four Hitachi 15K SAS drives. So I actually, and these are 600 gigs. I had four 250 gig SATA drives in two of these before. I just recently added this third node in the last week. And the performance just wasn't great. I wasn't satisfied with it, especially compared to coming off of that NFS that my FreeNAS server was providing. It was just way faster. I was getting way better disk performance out of my VMs, and when I was trying to migrate VMs between things, or when I'm trying to move disks around from different storages. You know, typically or theoretically I wouldn't have to do that a lot, but it's just nice to see things moving quickly. So I was not satisfied with that, and I thought, well, I'm going to add another node, and I'm going to get some better disks. So I did some testing with these, with 4 15K SAS drives in each one of my nodes here. I added all those as OSDs. I created a pool, and attached that and used that for the block storage of my virtual disks. My performance went from about 25 megabits if I do just a quick DD speed test on my disks inside of one of my virtual machines. It went from about 25 megabytes to 60. So that's a huge improvement there. So now I just want to see like what kind of additional performance I can squeeze out by adding these NVMe drives. Everyone says that they can definitely help a lot. Especially since the way that I'm going to set this pool up is I want 2 copies, but only one of them has to be written to disk before it'll respond back. And if I understand how all this stuff works correctly, that one write can be to that NVMe drive, which again should be significantly faster. Now, the downside to all this from what I read, and I'm going to try it a few different ways and we'll see the results, but I've got 4 disks here. Those Dell 410s will actually hold up to 6. I was just cheap and didn't want to buy another cable for drives that I didn't have. I figured I'd start out with each 4. A lot of people were saying that you don't want to oversaturate your NVMe drive, or your journal device in general. What happens is when that journal device goes down, everything that's dependent upon that journal device goes down as well. And I don't want to lose an entire node if I lose one of these NVMe drives, especially since they're kind of the cheaper ones. I'll link the other video where I review them and talk about the price and stuff, but they're the cheapest ones that I could find, 128 gig NVMe drives. So we'll see. I'm taking a shot on them. I don't know how long they'll last. If they fail on me in 2 months, then I'll probably go out and buy some nice Samsungs or something like that to drop in there, but I wanted to try it. So more on that later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go install these in my nodes, in my Proxmox nodes. We'll get them up. Hopefully I don't have to do too much tinkering. If I do, I'll bring you guys back in so you can kind of go through the same thing here. But I want to get them so that they're showing up in here as well. And then we'll go through and we will start adding our OSDs to our Ceph configuration here. Once that's done, we'll create our pools. And then again, I'm just going to do that quick DD test. I'll migrate one of these. Probably the one that I've been using for testing is my SSH Bastion, which is right here. So we'll use that one for that kind of testing. We'll get into it. We'll do some DD tests. We'll also monitor the transfer speed from NFS to the Ceph when we migrate the back end of these disks around, and we'll just see what it looks like. Right now, when I was migrating from NFS to the Ceph solution, I think it was writing at 160 gigs or something like that, when I had only the 250 gig SATA drives in there that were old SATA drives. I was getting like maybe enough to saturate a gigabit link, which isn't bad. It's really not. But I did just also spend in the last month the $200 required to get me a 10 gig switch. So everything about these VMs is 10 gig. Anyways, enough of that. I am going to phase out here. I'm gonna put these things together. I'm gonna get them installed on my nodes. And then we'll come back and we'll see what that looks like. And hopefully I'm hoping that when I reboot these things back up, again, it just pops right up here into my drive list and we are ready to go. But more on that later. I guess we'll see you in just a second. All right, guys, we're back in. I got those installed. I threw them in, and just like I was able to find online, we can see they showed up. I didn't have to do anything. Again, I don't think that you could expect to be able to boot from these on older hardware, but at least if you're on modern operating systems, and in this case I'm using Proxmox, Linux. The Linux kernel is 5.3, and I'm on Proxmox version 6, installed and completely upgraded as of 3/6/2020. Will it go ahead and we'll initialize these? I think we have to. So we'll go through to our other VM and we will initialize the NVMe. And we'll go ahead and do that on our third one. I think we have to initialize our other ones as well. Actually, I'm not 100% sure about that. Let's check. So I might have to take another break and do some more research, because what I've read, I also need to partition this out. I don't think that the Proxmox interface will do it for me. If that's the case, that means we need to go to the command line, which is no big deal. I'm actually pretty comfortable on the command line. If I do reference any documentation, I will add that in the description below as well for the commands that I run. But, I mean, I think the first thing I'm going to try here is let's open up our Ceph. We can see I don't have anything going on right now. I had the Ceph with just the SAS drives. So we'll come to our OSD. And I want to create an OSD. So we can see that it detects this, but I don't want to use that one. I want to use one of my SAS drives. But I do want to use this as the DB disk, and then I want to use the wall disk as the DB disk as well. Now, what I think is going to happen here if I do this is it's going to use this whole drive, even though I don't need the whole drive, and it will not allow me to do additional partitions on this. So we'll just see what happens. I'm going to hit create. Worst case, I can destroy it. So now we'll go ahead and we'll reload. And there it is. So there's the OSD. We can see the weight and all that other stuff. So now I'll try to create another one. Yeah, see, and that doesn't seem to show up. Oh, it does. Ah. Okay, so it looks like it will handle that stuff for me in the background. And that's great. That's exactly what I want to see, because I don't want to have to sit here and pound out a bunch of different partitions. We'll look at the partition table after this really quick and just check. But I think we should be golden. So we're just gonna go ahead and create the rest of our OSDs here, yeah, we'll go through it. So I'm gonna create a little montage, I guess, while I do that, and then we'll come back. Okay, so it looks like I did run into an issue, so I might have to manually create the partitions on that, because now it's saying that I do not have enough free space. I did 2 of them. When I tried to do the third, it didn't work right. Which 128 gigs, I know it wants to use a lot, but I feel like 128 gigs for, you know, a few terabytes. I think they were saying that you want something like 4 gigs per terabyte, and I've got 3 gig storage. So I was thinking I could break it up between the 3 disks that I want to use. And we'll get back to why I'm only using 3 in a second. You know, divide 3 by 120, and you get 40 gigs or whatever each. So let's open up that shell. And here it is. Yes, we want to continue. And I think we can look at that by just a normal DF. Oh, no. We want to look at the partitions. So it's going to be dv / something. All right. Sorry, I want to quit, I think it is. We want to do, we just want to list. I guess it's like I'm a command line newbie or something here. All right. So I'm actually not seeing any partitions on here. Let's just do. Okay, so maybe these are the ones that I need to look at. So we'll open this up a little more. So I'm seeing my, how big is this one? So here's my root volume on that solid state. Here's the solid state. Here's this. It does not show any partitions on here, but I see these. Oh, right here. Okay, I think I see what happened. So 55.5. Yeah. So I'm guessing that it divided that thing into 50 gig sections of that NVMe drive, and I do not want that. I want, honestly, probably 20 gig sections. I might try it with 4 drives. So here's what I'm thinking, guys. Overall, I probably will have to, if this works, I'm only going to do the NVMe drive. I'm only going to have it act as that database disk for 3 of the OSDs that I have, even though I have 4 available. And the reason is, if the NVMe fails, then the drives fail as well. Because it doesn't have that journal disk. They're kind of like tied up to each other. So I'm only going to do 3 OSDs per NVMe, and then I'm going to get, if this works, I can have a total of 6 drives inside of my chassis. So I'll do 2 NVMEs in there, and each of those will back up 3 of my OSDs. That way, if one NVMe does go out, at worst case, I only lose 3 of my OSD data drive. So that's going to set me back a little bit today on the storage that I can use, but apparently one of the great things about Ceph is that you can just keep adding storage and nodes, no problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little research and find out what I need to do to override, I should say, the setting that makes it just want to use half of the disk, and I will come back. Alright guys, we're back in. I figured it out. It's actually quite easy. So I think by default it was using, I don't know, some formula that Ceph uses, blah blah blah, but you can override it. So we'll get to the actual command here in a minute, but I was reading, and this is for Proxmox specifically, so if you're using Ceph in another way, you'll likely have to reference the Ceph documentation on BlueStore configuration. But for Ceph, what you can do is you can manually create, and the GUI does all of this, it just uses defaults. So this is how we override the defaults, but you can basically run this PVE Ceph OSD create command, and then you just give it the device string that you want to use, and then you can tell it to use a DB size. Now, if you specify the DB device but not the wall device, it just uses the same as the DB, which is fine for me. It's going to be on the same disk, so I don't need to create another partition or another section of that. So in this case, I started out and I allocated 20 gigs of storage to for each OSD that I'm using. As you can see, I've got the 3 of them set up here on VM3, and if we come down to the OSDs, we can see I have 3. Now, like I said before, I ultimately would like to do a split of 3 and 3. However, since I was just thinking about it, since right now I only have 4 disks, I'm going to go ahead and add the 4th disk on that same one, because if I have the one fail, I'm still losing all 3 in a single node. With the plan, probably next month-ish, assuming everything is working good and I can get a little performance by probably having a little bit of a lower NVMe to OSD ratio. And so next month is when I'll probably bite the bullet. I'll buy another 3 of these NVMEs, another 3 of these PCI Express adapters, and then I'll buy another 6 15K SAS drives. So we'll get back to the setup. So like I said, I have on here, I've got my 3 OSDs on VM3 set up already, and we'll go through this command again really quickly here. And all it is, and I will probably actually have to, let me just jump back to the disk to make sure. Yes, SDE is the only one left. Okay, so the only thing that we really have to do, again, is you pull up the command line of your node that the disks are on, the PVE Ceph create OSD, then we label out the device that we want. So this is the only part that changes once you get the rest of this in place. So I'm going to switch that to SDE. And then we indicate that DB device that we want to use. And since we don't indicate wall, it will use the DB device for wall as well. And that's my NVMe 0 and 1. And the DB size, this is in gigabytes, and so I've decided I want to do 20 gig sections. So with 4 of them, that puts me at 80 gigs usage. Probably when I add more disks and I add another thing, I'll get that closer to using the full capacity. I think larger is bigger in almost all, or larger or bigger is better, as they say, in almost all cases. So that's what we're going to do here. Other than that, let me think, I changed SDSC, so we can just hit enter. And that's going to go ahead and it's going to go through a few things here where it just updates stuff. And it's kind of cool to see this thing running so you know that it's working. You know, when we were doing it from the command line or from the GUI earlier, you don't get to see all the neat stuff flashing, and it just, you know, makes you feel super awesome after you do it. So there, that's done. We'll slide that over to here for a second. If we reload here, this should show up. Yep, it shows up that we're now using that as an OSD. We come to our OSD map. We can see we have the 4 that are now referenced by that single NVMe. And then what we can do to kind of check that is if we go back to our F disk, we'll expand this out a little bit more, and we can see before where we were seeing, where are they? Oh, no, they're way over here on the side. Okay, yeah. So right here, we can see here's 120 gig one. Here's the and I'm not super familiar with this LVM technology. I really need to get up to date on it. I think it's something that everyone's doing now, and figure out exactly what that means. But it's like, here's the drives up here, but instead of showing normal partitions and stuff like this, it mounts it a super funny way. Anyways, but we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 of those 20 gig partitions on that device. So that's how we know that that works. So we've got our 20 gigs associated with each of our 558, or gigabytes, I should say, not gigabytes, for each of our drives. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through, and this time I'm going to do the montage. I'm going to quickly go through it. We'll get the rest of these set up, and we'll do some testing. So we'll be back with you after this short montage. All right, the montage is over. We're back. I'm going to reload some of these things here. Now we can see we've got 6, 8, 10. Wow, they came in and I was doing them at the same time. I don't know if you saw that simultaneously between VM1 and VM2. But we can come down to our Ceph here. Now we can see we have 6 terabytes total. And we have all of our OSDs up and available. So that's super awesome. Everything worked, I'm sure. I used the same command. So now the only last thing we have to do before we can get into testing is create our pool. So I like to call it CDD for like Ceph disk drive. I don't know. It's kind of just a little weird thing. It just helps me keep that in place there. The PG number, again, I haven't totally like maybe taken the time to fully grasp what this is, but from what I understand, the more disks you have up to a certain point, like if you have after 10, you want to have like or more than 6, you want to have like 256 or 512 or whatever, but it has to do with how many little data blocks that they have replicated across all of your nodes. So more isn't always better. There's kind of a fine balance for performance and recovery and that kind of stuff. But anyways, that's kind of a long-winded thing. Basically, I'm going to do 512. We're going to create it. And it looks like it's working. We got no output there. But it made it. Okay, so now we have this, and we can see that Ceph automatically, or I should say Proxmox, adds that as a new storage location. So that's super cool. So we've got that there. We've got our usage here. So the first thing I'm going to do, like I said, is I'm going to migrate this hard drive. We want to delete the source, and we are going to put it on that new Ceph disk drive. So let's do this, and actually I'm going to duplicate this window. And we will split screen here for a moment. Come on, baby. And what I want to look at is I want to look at this Ceph overview here. And I believe it should tell us. Yeah. So right now that's writing. The speed I think is a little bit. Yeah, we're getting up into the 200. I think before I was maxing out at like 160. When I was doing this here, it's going up a little more. So I definitely feel like I'm getting some improvement, you know. When I went from just 250 gig old junker drives to these SAS drives, I went from like 100 to 160, and now it looks like my peak is at 223. Let's go ahead and move another one that's a little bigger. Oh, here we go. Maybe those NVMe's just need to warm up or need to catch a good bounce, but now we're up at like 300. So definitely seeing some improvement. So let's dump into the temp here. Well, dv0 equals a little dat file. Count will do 1M, and block size will do 10. 24, and I believe that should give us a 1 gig data file that's full of zeros, just so we can see how that streams out to the wow, yeah. So again, that about doubled it. So I was at about 60 megabits per second before without that NVMe flash, and now it's at 122. So I'm gonna we're gonna do a little read test here now. So we'll do ddif equals test.dat, and out file is going to be, we're just going to dump that to the null device, and it's just going to soak those up and basically do nothing with them. So let's see what that looks like. And we can see over here this is spiking in usage a bit as we're reading that out. It looks like the read is taking a little longer than the write. Yeah, okay, so we read that one at 60, which is interesting. I wonder if we've reached a point. Well, I guess that maybe makes sense. When we're writing, we're able to write to that NVMe stuff. Now when we're reading, we are kind of just reading right off of the disk. So I'll have to do a little bit of research into that. But again, I'm pretty satisfied with that. So all in all, guys, I appreciate you guys watching. This has definitely been a long one. I've recorded a lot, but I'm super excited about it. I will... If you enjoyed it, if you like hearing about this kind of content, definitely reach out to me. Let me know in the comments. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you can. And with that, we'll see you next time.